Hi there, I'm Phil Holton and I'm a wood turner. I'm very happy to welcome you to my shop. These last months I've been showing you about my wood turning and the kinds of things I do. One of the things I want to do is let you know about a couple of videotapes that I have, DVDs, that $25 for the two of them. The number will be on the screen later for you to give me a call or check my website. Love to have you do that. I also have workshops that happen in my shop, so I'd love to hear if you'd like to learn more about turning. Today we're going to talk about Scandinavian rosemulled bowls, and I'm part of a little bit of a revolution. They have done very traditional shapes over the years, but now some of the rosemullers are getting interesting. They want to have much more interesting shapes. They like my bark edges, they like my natural edges, they like some of the designs some of the imperfections in the wood. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So here we have a basswood log. I've cut it in half. I'm using a piece of cardboard here to mark a circle. Here's what that looks like when that's been marked. So I've pounded it in there. I've actually started this one just a little bit. So I can show you kind of how this works. So we're coming right over here. I'm going to use the mallet and pound the center in right here. So this, I've made a few cuts on it, not too many, so that you can get an idea about how this works. We're going to start the lathe a little slower for safety purposes, and then we'll bring up the speed. This is a bowl gouge. You must not try a bowl with a spindle gouge or a roughing gouge. This is its own special kind of tool that we have helped make the shape for the chuck. And then we're giving this some shape. I'm riding the bevel of the tool is one of the things that you would learn if you came to my workshop, because you can't just stab it in there. It needs to be controlled, and that's about the angle with which I bring it. So see, I'm coming around the corner. I'm watching up there because the most important thing is the shape that I get. I want to have a shape that's very pleasing, because finally, after the pretty wood doesn't show anymore or something, why it's the shape that might make your grandchildren want to keep this around. And so I'm always very conscious of what kind of shape that I give. It needs to have a very nice curve. Sailors would call it a fair curve that keeps moving. Now we've got a little tear out here, so I'm going to try to clean up that tear out by taking very, very light cuts. We're going to pick up the speed here. So I'm taking very fine shavings. And I just love the way that movement translates into a nice curve. We'll come back again, take an even finer shaving. And when we do that, we get a beautiful finish that we're not going to have to sand too much. This is a kind of bowl that we call twice turned. As this is most of my bowls, I finish green. But this one is going to need to have one more step to it. So it's going to be dried before it's finished turned, because my rosemullers want them to be round. And I'm going to put a little dovetail in here so I can hold that on to my chuck. Get some of that extra stuff out. So this is going to be turned again, so I'm not super careful about the finish, but I want it to be as good as possible so it dries evenly. So then we will put it in a chuck. Okay, we wood turners like to use these chucks. It's a 4-jaw self-centering chuck that has jaws just made for wood turning. holds into a little dovetail on this basswood. And so I'm going to start turning this, and it's going to throw some pretty good spray. So be very careful I don't do that very thing and take some bark off the top. So I spin that before I start. I'm going to be pretty aggressive here. This is something you learn with a lot of experience. If you were starting in one of my workshops, this would go a little bit slower, but you'd make your way to hollowing the bowl, and so this is basswood, which is fairly soft. It's one of the reasons I can move quite so fast as this, but even something like maple is not that much slower. Okay, so now I'm going to take the tailstock out of my way. I left it in there just so I could be a little more aggressive. And now we'll finish up to the bottom of this bowl. Now, I'm not going to make this particularly thin, but because this is going to be twice turned, sounds like it's just rattling a little bit. I'm going to make sure this is good and tight. Don't want this coming out. I can kind of hear that was just a little bit loose. That feels real good. Because I'm making pretty good cuts here. Now, if I was turning a regular bowl, I would make this about 3/16 of an inch thick, sometimes an eighth, sometimes a quarter. It's definitely much thinner than this. But this bowl is going to be dried, so it needs to have enough thickness so that as it twists and warps, there's still something left inside. Here we go. Now I'm going to use a little tool here that helps me decide how thick it is, and I need it to be thicker up at the top, not quite so much down here. So we're pretty good to thickness, but I want it to be a little smoother. So we'll try to blend that curve a little nicer, and we'll get our chips to be a little thinner. Because this is an in-turn bowl, it's a little harder for me to get down to the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to use this round nose to just clean up a little bit at the bottom. And then we're done. So this is a kind of fast process when we're working it like this. But now I'll take this, I'll leave it sitting in my shop for a few days. It won't take very long for it to dry. Once it's dry, then I'll put it back in the lathe to make a finished one that'll have a nicer finish and thickness and so on. And then I'll turn it over to my rose maulers who will love to paint it. So this is some of the best rose mauling artists in the country are using my bowls, and they're doing an incredible job. So you can take a good look at them there. Beautiful work. They spend a lot of time doing that. But I want to invite you to consider taking a workshop in my shop, or maybe you want to buy one of my bowls. But I'd love to have you, to visit with you and let you know about my interest and joy and skill at wood turning, and hope to develop that in you too. So thanks for joining me today in my wood turning shop.